Hey everybody, welcome to this week's virtual garden story time. Our topic this week is going to be flowers. We're going to read a book called Flowers Are Calling by Rita Gray, and then we're going to have a fun quiz to see how many flower names you know. And then we're going to use some cardboard and some rubber bands to make a flower press so that you can do some artwork with dried flowers this week. Flowers Are Calling by Rita Gray. Flowers are calling a little black bear. No, not a bear. He doesn't care. They're calling a butterfly to dip from the air. Flowers are calling a wet green frog. No, not a frog. She likes her soggy bog. They're calling a bumblebee to look near their log. Flowers are calling a porcupine. No, not a porcupine. She wouldn't take the time. They're calling a hummingbird to sip at their vine. There's the Queen Anne's lace that the butterflies like, and the monk's hood that the bees like, the bumblebees, and a trumpet honeysuckle. See the long tube? They like the long tubes for their tongues to reach down the nectar that's at the very end. Flowers are calling a loud blue jay. No, not a jay. He wouldn't stay. They're calling a honeybee to fly their way. Flowers are calling a little moose. No, not a moose. What would be the use? They're calling a beetle to eat their pollen loose. Flowers are calling a rabbit to stop. No, not a rabbit. It's not their habit to call a rabbit. He might grab it. They're calling a bee fly to visit their spot. There's the apple tree blossom that the honeybees help make apples. And a magnolia. Beetles like magnolias. Oh, and the violets, the bee flies. It says they look like bumblebees, but they have 2 wings instead of 4. Flowers are calling a small brown snake. No, not a snake, for goodness sake. They're calling a pollen wasp with nectar to take. Flowers are calling a fat raccoon. No, not a raccoon. He doesn't care for white bloom or sweet perfume. They're calling a moth in the light of the moon. Flowers are calling a desert deer. No, not a deer. He can't even get near. They're calling a nectar bat to flap over here. There's the blowout beard tongue that the pollen wasp, they like the nectar. And here's a cactus. It says the cactus flowers unfurl for just one short night, and that's when the bats come to pollinate them. And then the moonflower, the sphinx moths are what pollinate those, because they too just open for one night. Flowers are calling a busy wren. No, not a wren. He's already seen them. They're calling some children to look again. So it says here, when you look at a flower, what do you see? You see the color, because sometimes bright colors are what help the pollinators find them, and like lighter colors are good at night. Or maybe there's a pattern that the pollinators like, or a shape like the tubes that the hummingbirds like. So there's all different things to look at when you look at a flower. And the smell too, because the smell is what attracts us, right? But it also attracts different pollinators. And then the time of opening, because like those ones that just open one time at night, it's when their pollinators come, or at night. It's the end. Let's play a fun game called Can You Name the Flower? got several pictures I'm going to show you, and we're going to try to figure out if we can figure out what the flower is. Here's the first one. Do you recognize this flower? What do you think it might be? Do you think it's a lily, or a rose, or a daffodil, or an iris? What's your guess? Did you say rose? You would have been right. Good job. How about this flower? Do you think it's a daffodil, or a daisy, maybe a marigold, or a tulip? What's your guess? It's a marigold. Good job. Here's another one. Is it a daisy, a sunflower, a lily, or a pansy? Did you guess pansy? Good job. How about this pretty pink flower? Is it a petunia, a daisy, a zinnia, or a poppy? Petunia. How about this one? Do you think it might be a daisy, or a lily, or an iris, maybe a tulip? What's your guess? It's a lily. Hope you had fun, and maybe this will help you recognize some of the flowers that you see out on your walks or maybe in your own backyard. So now that you know some of the names to some of the flowers you might see in your yard, go take a garden walk and see what kind of flowers you can find. I took a container out and I found a rose in my yard and some dianthus. Also, sometimes some people call them carnation or pinks. We had some pansies blooming. We had some marigolds, some salvia. We had lots of really neat things blooming in my yard. So I went out and I made a collection of flowers that I wanted to press. So I'm gonna give you a couple of tips about things to think about when you're collecting flowers to press. The first thing is always to ask permission before you cut a flower, because you don't want to cut your mom or your dad's favorite flower out of the yard and then be responsible for not having that flower still blooming, right? So ask permission first, and then look for some flowers. Like this rose is gonna be really neat to press, but we're gonna have to take the petals off because if you think about it, it's just too much to try to squeeze flat, right? So think of flowers that have petals that aren't very thick, that are going to be able to dry and to be able to be pressed between the pages of your press. You can also collect some leaves. I had a Japanese maple that was really pretty, and ferns make another great pressed leaf. So go out and collect some flowers from your yard, and then we're going to make a flower press. So to make the flower press, you have to have some cardboard and some paper. And I have two different types of paper here. The first is like a heavier watercolor paper. It could also be cardstock, something that's like thicker. And then also just some regular computer paper, that'll work as well. The one thing you don't want to use is any type of paper, like a paper towel that has a whole bunch of indentions or ripples or anything like that, because that texture might show up on your flower, which you don't want to do. You don't have like a pattern on your flower. And the next thing, so for the cardboard, you're just going to cut it down to whatever size that you want your press to be. Now all of our flowers are sort of small flowers, right? So we don't need a huge press. So let's make this one almost like for your pocket, right? I'm going to make it. And the cardboard is going to be the covers of our press. They're going to be the parts of the press that are the top and the bottom. And it's just cardboard or anything that's really stiff would be what you want, because this is going to apply the pressure to be able to squeeze those flowers tight. And then our paper, we just need to cut that down so it fits inside of our flower press. And if you need help cutting, ask an older sibling or a parent to help you to make sure, because sometimes cardboard can be a little hard to cut. And that's about the right size, that's okay. cut some more. And the number of pages that you want to cut are really going to be up to you and how many flowers you're going to go out and collect. So it doesn't really matter. You've got thick paper, you've got regular paper, whatever type of paper that you can have. So lay down the back cover of your flower press. And I'm going to show you with the leaves. It's really easy. You can just put it right on there and then add another page, because we don't want anything else touching it. Because what the flower press is going to do is squeeze out the moisture from your leaves and your flower petals. Now, another good tip about going on your flower walk and looking for things is to go not first thing in the morning, because there might be some dew or some moisture from the night, but go sort of early morning, because you don't want to go too late in the afternoon, because then the flowers are going to be just sort of starting to, I don't want to say wilt, but they sort of get a little droopy in the afternoons just with the heat. So go sort of mid-morning, and you can see while I was talking, I took off the stem from the pansy so that I could lay that flower down. Oh, there's an ant. So I could lay that flower down, and now when I add the paper to it, the stem won't get in the way. Now, if you wanted to keep the stem for your picture, you can always put it right there on the side and press it too. Just make sure there's plenty of space between them, right? And I put the flower face down so that I can make sure the petals were all sort of laying out and wouldn't get all folded up. So then there's another one. Now this rose, I know you guys are excited about the rose. Like I was saying, it's sort of hard to put a rose down and just squish it, right? You can try, but there's a lot of petals that are overlapping, and it might hold on to the moisture longer, so you'd have to leave it in the press for longer. What I like to do with roses is pull the petals apart and then lay the petals individually, and then when you make your creation with your dried flowers, you can put the petals back together to recreate the rose. So just gently pull those petals apart. Oops, that one ripped. And lay them out just so that they don't touch each other, right? And then because this paper is thinner, I'm using the printer paper, I'm gonna put a couple of sheets between the next layer of flowers, just because I don't want any moisture to come to the other flowers that I'm gonna put on here. Now the same thing with a marigold flower. I think that this would be a really cool flower to press, but it's just so thick back here that I'm gonna take these petals off and lay those down individually, and then whenever I decide to create something with these petals, I'll put them back together in a flower shape. And then put a couple more sheets of paper down, just like we did, since we're using the thinner paper now. And then let's see here. Oh, the salvia. I was gonna try the salvia. Now this is a fun flower. Sort of has almost a flat view this way, so I'm going to try some going this way, but I'm also going to try a few on their side, and that's totally up to you. It's where you can be creative and see how it works. So I think that might be able to press down once I put the cover on it. We'll see how that turns out. And another one that I liked was this columbine, and this one I probably didn't pick the right one. Usually flowers, you want to get fresh flowers, like flowers that just started to bloom, because once they start to get a little bit older, they just sort of lose some of their color and some of their the beauty of them, right? All right, so now take your cover and we're gonna put that on there, and this is where you need your rubber bands. Really carefully, and you might need an extra set of hands. Place your rubber band around one end, and then place this one around the other end. Now that we've got it together, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna wrap it around one more time, because we really wanna squeeze these pages together so we can squeeze all the moisture out of our flowers. And depending on what size you have, you might wanna use a third rubber band just to keep the pressure where you're pushing down on it evenly, but two should do this one just fine. Now you're gonna have to wait a couple of weeks, like maybe a week or two, before you open it back up. to see how your flowers are doing. You'll know that they're ready when you pick them up and they stay flat. If a petal ever starts to curl back, you know that you need to keep on pressing it for a little bit longer. And if you notice, if you had a really thick one and you notice that it starts to get thinner, you might give your rubber bands like another turn around your press to keep on putting pressure on the pieces of cardboard to keep on flattening out those flowers. And then once you're done, you're gonna have some fun things to create pictures with. My daughter is an expert four-leaf clover finder, and so she had pressed all these four-leaf clovers. So now she can go back and she can make a fun picture using all of her four-leaf clovers and all of her different styles, but then you can put them together and make different pictures, and you can make a card or make a beautiful picture to put on your refrigerator. So I hope you guys enjoy.